guys since we're here, and maybe it'll give you a better idea of what we're working with before we get started. So, let me know if you guys can see this. There it is. It also doubles as a nightstand. And I actually kind of have beef with this bookshelf because when I ordered it on Etsy last year, I thought I was being a conscious consumer, supporting a small business. And when I thought that I was supporting a small business, I did not think that I was going to be getting a small bookshelf, because I am convinced that the place I ordered from mixed my order up with the bookshelf they were supposed to send to Stuart Little's house, because this thing is so fucking tiny. It barely holds a dozen books, and I basically ran out of storage space in there after like 3 months. So, regardless, it does hold enough books for me to make a video about, so I have pulled basically all of them out, and tonight I'm going to go through some of my favorites, as I've already said. So, now that I'm repeating myself, why don't we just get started? So, the first book I want to show you guys is probably my favorite read of this past year, and that book is called The Creative Act. The Creative Act, A Way of Being. And it was written by Rick Rubin. So, for every book I show you, until my back gives out because I'm sitting on the floor, like I said, and I can feel my spine disconnecting from the rest of my body, I am going to give you guys a quick description of what it's about and why I love it so much. So, if you're interested, you can go check it out. Sorry, I don't have an Amazon storefront, so you're just going to have to do it the old-fashioned way and look it up. But, anyways, Rick Rubin is a legendary music producer. I first learned about him when I heard him on a podcast sometime last year because he was promoting his book, and he has basically worked with every major artist and band you can think of from the past 30 years, like Adele, Beyonce, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the Bleachers, the Strokes, all the bands, Jay-Z, Travis Scott, literally everybody. So, it's fair to say that he has a pretty good amount of experience with making stuff, and if you couldn't guess by the fact that I am making a YouTube video right now, I love creative stuff. I love to make art. I love to share stories, blah, blah, blah. And so the reason I love this book so much is because it's basically like a Bible for creativity. It's just comprised of a bunch of different lessons into the creative process and where creativity comes from and how to get inspired and lean into your moments of inspiration. So part of why I like it so much is because you're not meant to agree with everything he says or resonate with every point he makes. I think there are between something like 40 and 70 different little tidbits of creativity that he's just learned over the years, and some of them I didn't really click with, and others I feel like really hit home for me. And truthfully, part of why I'm sitting here trying to make YouTube videos again is because of this book. And so, I know that maybe not all of you guys consider yourselves creative in the common sense of the word. You know, whenever somebody mentions creativity, you think of people who make movies or art or draw or paint or are in the entertainment industry in some capacity. I disagree. I think that everybody is creative, and that almost everything we do involves some element of creativity. Whether you are imagination to picture the world you're in, which is what I do with all my fiction books, and the next book I'm going to show you is fiction, so yeah, I think everybody's creative. I think everybody has to be, and it's just so fun to make something out of nothing, so if you have an ounce of creativity in you, which I know you do, but if you also like to make stuff, then I would so highly recommend that book. Yeah, I love it. If you've read it, let me know down below, because I want to hear what your thoughts were on it. So, that is book number 1 down, and like I just said, the second book that I pulled out to show you guys is a fiction book, and it is called Normal People. Normal People. And it was written by Sally Rooney. And it apparently also exists as a show on Hulu, so if you're not in your reading era, as the girlies would say, then maybe you could just watch it, but I would recommend reading it. I also read this last year, but it's basically, from what I remember, about these 2 kids, Connell and Marianne, and it follows their adventures as they grow up in, I believe, Ireland, and run into and away from each other's lives at various different points. So it's very coming of age, it has some romance, it has some humor, and the one distinct thing I remember about this book is that it also doesn't use quotation marks when people are talking. So sometimes, or right when I would start reading, somebody would say something and I thought it was still the author talking because there weren't quotes that signified the start of the sentence. And at first I thought that was really annoying and it kind of pissed me off, but I actually grew to really like it, and I thought it was cool that the author made this kind of stylistic choice to write differently, and it got me involved in the story in a different way. And as I have established 1,000 different times on my channel, I love, and this book has a lot of romance and tension and drama. So, I would definitely recommend it. It's a pretty quick read too. I think it's less than 200 pages, and the words were pretty big, so if you're looking to get back into reading, then this might be the place for you to start. Okay. The third book in my little pile that I have collected alongside myself is called The 5 a.m. Club. The 5 a.m. Club. And it was written by Robin Sharma. Now, I read this book closer to 2 years ago, when I was really in my self-development phase, which truthfully I've never really left because I am obsessed with self-improvement books and just trying to be better in general. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not, but in this case it is, because I get to show you guys some of what I've read, specifically the ones that I like the most, because I've definitely read a couple that I did not like at all. So, 2 reasons why I like this book. For starters, I'll tell you what it's about. It's basically written as a story where there is this kind of teacher or professor who's just this very wise man who has succeeded in the business world and in life. And he is leading this conference about, I think, productivity or something. I really hope I don't fuck this up, but essentially it's about these 3 individuals who want to take their lives to the next level and learn how to make the most of their lives. And this guy teaches them how to do that its simplest terms, it is a book on why you should wake up early. And believe me, I understand if you are resistant to that idea, because I was. And truthfully, after I read the book, I got up at 5 a.m. for like 2 months, and then I stopped because it was just too difficult. But ironically, about a month ago, I started getting up at 5:30 a.m. again, and it has just been such a sick experience, honestly. I just love the feeling of being up while the sun is actually rising, and I don't want to go off on a tangent here and get on my soapbox, but this book kind of just talks about why it could be so impactful for you to at least just wake up earlier. I know the 5 a.m. thing is pretty, like, I don't know, just hearing the word 5 a.m. is pretty triggering. But, yeah, it was just different because a lot of self-help books I found are very generalized and kind of preachy, but this book was not only told in the form of a story, but it just introduces a very specific concept and an idea about something you could add to your life that could make differences in a lot of ways. So, if you've been thinking about getting up a little earlier, or if you just want to read a self-help book that's kind of fictionalized, then I would definitely suggest this one. I kind of want to read it again, but now that I'm getting up earlier on my own, and actually trying to read fewer self-help books because I've been, like, self-destructing on overthinking about ways to be better lately, I might just stay away from it. So, next book in our speed run. This is a very popular fiction book, and it is called The Tattooist of Auschwitz. The Tattooist of Auschwitz. And it was written by Heather Morris. And on the cover here it says it's based on a true story, which I forgot about. So, I read this a while back, and without going too far into detail, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have already heard of it, it's about this man who is sent to Auschwitz and ends up becoming one of the men who tattoos the IDs, the numbers on the prisoners who are entering the camps. And somewhere along the lines, he meets this woman who is also at the camp, and they fall in love, and I think that there truly may never have been a more dangerous place to fall in love with somebody than in the setting of this book, which is obviously a concentration camp. And so this book has many different elements to it. Of course, there are the well-documented and known horrors of life in a concentration camp and all the uncertainty and tragedy that surrounds that experience. But then you add in this new developing relationship that is, I think, made a million times more meaningful to these two individuals because of where they are and the fact that life is so far from guaranteed. And it's just a beautiful story. And to know that it's based on two people's real life experiences is nothing short of incredible. And it is a very emotional book. I think I might have shed a tear or two. And obviously it has very sensitive subject matter, so I would proceed with a little bit of caution if you think about reading this one, but it's definitely one of the best books I've read. In terms of, I guess you can't even call it fiction. I think I might have started by calling it fiction. precipice of falling asleep right now and just wake up. So, this was actually the first self-help book I read about 2.5 years ago, and it was recommended to me by my therapist because, as she has described me, and I think I have described myself in other videos, I am very existential. I love to think about the meaning of things and my purpose and where I am in the universe and what my reason for existing is. And this book definitely taps into some of those things. But the reason I got The Tattooist of Auschwitz is because this book was written by Viktor Frankl, who is a very popular psychologist from the 20th century who was also sent to a concentration camp. And so this book is so unique and fascinating because it's written almost entirely about his experience in a concentration camp, which I also think might have been Auschwitz, but I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. So he writes about how he saw people's purposes change and what he saw people adjust the meanings of their lives to be as they tried to survive and just make it another day. So really, it's a book about meaning and purpose in the most devastating and difficult of situations. Difficult is an understatement, I know. But basically, the first half of the book talks about his experiences in the camp and his relationships with other prisoners and some of the guards and officers, and how he saw them behaving as their time in the camp dragged on, and some of their hopes faltered and other people found other reasons to live for. One of the big themes of the book is love, and that in the absence of love, there was no hope for the people who were placed in these camps. And then the second half is a little bit more psychological and theoretical, and just dives into some of his ideas about man's search for purpose. So, again, this is a very heavy read, but I think part of the appeal of it and why it hit me so hard is because it really shone a light on what is legitimately the most important to people when they are in the most dire of situations. And so, it definitely made me reevaluate the things that I see as being such big problems or frustrations in my life. And, again, if you're more existential and you like to think about what the meaning of life is, this is a great book with a very unique perspective on that topic. So, I will move on to the next book after I take a quick 4-second water break. Also, if you're still listening, let me know what you think of the background lights. That's kind of a recent addition to my setup. I think it just kind of mixes it up a little bit because I make all my videos in my room and I just wanted to have some variety. So, anyways, the next book on my list on my shelf, is the book that I'm reading right now and that I'm almost done with actually. And that is Read, Write, Own. Read, Write, Own. Building the Next Era of the Internet. I hope you didn't hear that I accidentally is his official title, at one of Silicon Valley's largest VC funds, venture capital. So it's those guys who invest in startups and help them try to grow so that they can make a shit ton of money. I first learned about this book probably less than a month ago when I was listening to a podcast. It was actually Rick Rubin's podcast, I think, and he had this guy Chris Dixon on, and they were talking about, and don't freak out when I say these words, but crypto and the blockchain, the blockchain, the blockchain. And believe me, I probably would have had the same reaction as you a month ago. But when this guy was explaining what those things actually are, not in the sense of, like, not in the ways that they are more commonly known right now, which is as, like, meme coins and scams and mediums for pieces of shit to do really bad things to people. So anyways, when he was explaining what these things could actually be used for, that is when I really got interested in it, and so I bought this book, and it's essentially talking about what the next era of the internet looks like. But the reason it's so fascinating is because it's also, in part, a history lesson that talks about when the internet was founded and how it was originally set up. And so I guess I could give you a quick 30-second breakdown, because it's kind of just on my mind right now since it's the book I'm reading. But basically, when the internet was first created, it was, in a sense, kind of decentralized. You had what they call protocol networks, which were like email and the web, which essentially were not controlled by any one person. There are tons of different email service providers and web browsers, and if you don't like one, you can switch to the other. And you can take all your email contacts with you, or all your favorite website domains with you, whatever. And nobody was in control of them, basically. But, the second era of the internet, which is still kind of the one we are in now, is the right era. The first was read, where you were kind of just reading posts, and you couldn't really make stuff on the internet. Now we are in the right era, where you can publish posts, you can create stuff, and many of the world's largest networks are owned by corporations. So think Facebook, Instagram, I know they're owned by Meta, Google, Apple, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, etc., etc. These platforms are in complete control of your experience on the internet. So, if I'm on, and actually this used to happen when I made videos on TikTok, sometimes I would post videos that would get taken down for absolutely no reason, and I couldn't do anything about them, or I would post what I thought was my best video ever, and it would just eat shit. And so, kind of what he talks about is the fact that these big platforms have so much power, and people can't really do anything about their experience. And so it kind of all sets up for this idea of the next era of the internet, which is the owning era. And I'm sorry this feels so boring, I'm going to wrap it up right now. It talks about this idea of owning the things you make and your communities and your interactions on the blockchain as this decentralized thing where nobody is in charge of you and you have the freedom to switch from one platform to the other, which was actually probably the most interesting thing I learned in this book. One of them, at least. So imagine some world where if you're on setup anymore. This guy kind of talks about this idea that in Web3, as it's called, you could just download your followers list and move to a different photo sharing platform. Maybe it's called, I don't know, like PhotoShare. And all your followers would still see all your content. You wouldn't have to deactivate your account or delete it or give up your username and all that stuff. So it's just this interesting idea. I don't know. I'm still kind of working my way through it. But yeah, if you have any interest in technology and where things seem like they might be going, then I would definitely suggest this book because it breaks things down to their very simplest terms. And it wasn't hard for me to understand anything that he was describing because he did such a good job of putting information together. Okay, just a couple more. I think I have like 4 more. This next book I read in the middle of 2022, and it is called Never Enough. Never Enough. And it was written by Judith Grisel. This is a more science-y book. It says it on the cover here, but it's about the neuroscience and experience of addiction. And so when I first started reading, I tried to mix in some different genres and topics just so that I didn't get bored, and so I felt like I was learning more. So I picked a science book, and this is what I picked. And actually, I really liked this book because it taught me so much about addiction and what that actually looks like. Oh, I had to restart my camera. The one thing that I took away from this book is this concept of anti-A-N-T-I. So let me explain. And this has actually just been like a random party fact that you tell people in a conversation at a party. That's kind of how I've used it, but I think it's really fascinating. Essentially, your brain wants to maintain a state of homeostasis and balance as much as possible. That's something we all learned about growing up. I remember doing that, learning those lessons in school, homeostasis. So, when somebody is in a situation where they would consume substances or take drugs, however you want to say it, whenever they are in those situations or physical locations where they usually do drugs, so maybe it's at a bar and you're drinking, or it's at one of your best friend's house where you always smoke, or it's in an alley behind a dumpster where you do harder things. Your brain begins to recognize these patterns of behavior, and so anticipating the fact that it knows you're gonna use, it starts to generate these things called anti-opiates or anti-cannabinoids, or maybe it's cannabinoids. I think it's cannabinoids. Basically, these chemicals and molecules in your brain that simulate the opposite effects of whatever drug you're about to take, and that's what causes withdrawals. So, let's say you think about going to the bar, or you're showing up to the bar, and all of a sudden you start wanting a drink really, really badly. It's because your brain knows you're about to consume alcohol that's going to take your levels way, way up on the charts, and it doesn't want you to get too high, and it doesn't want you to get too low. So it generates those anti-molecules that take you a little lower on the charts, and it makes you start to feel off, and so you start craving because managing to balance you out a little bit so you don't get dangerously drunk or high or whatever it is. I just think that is the sickest thing ever, to know that that is actually what's going on in your brain. And that, of course, is what causes like really bad withdrawals, and that's where a lot of that pain stems from. But sometimes it's just nice to have a better idea of why you act the ways that you act in different situations, and this was one of those books for me. So yeah, it's pretty dense and scientific, but it's interesting. So, I don't know, maybe the way I described that piqued your interest. Anyways, a couple more. I'm getting ready to call it a night, so this next book is a fiction book, and it was written by John Irving, who is also the author of one of my other favorite books of all time that is out on loan to my girlfriend right now, so I don't have it, or else I would show it. But this one is called A Prayer for Owen Meanie. A Prayer for Owen Meanie. This book is like 600 pages long. It took me a really long time to read. But because it's so long, it creates such a realistic feeling, intense emotional world and connection, to the point that you really feel like you are with these characters. And it's about these two kids who grow up together. So once again, very coming of age. Those are just my favorite books because they're the ones I can relate the most to. And it's about this kid who has a lot of physical issues and his best friend, and it's narrated by the best friend, and it just talks about their experience growing up, and the kid, the best friend, loses his mother at an early age, and so it just navigates their relationship and their experience of life together. It's just a beautiful book. I don't know another way to say it. It is so well written. John Irving is such a good author. And the other book that I mentioned a minute ago is, I believe, a little bit more popular, and it's called Cider House Rules. Cider House Rules. Both of these books, I think, are set in and around World War II. I think Cider House Rules, I know, is, and then it goes, or no, the Vietnam War, that's what it is. I think they're both set in similar time frames. Cider House Rules is even better. I would recommend that above this one, but either work. So yeah, if you like getting into a really long book that spends a lot of time building out the world and the characters, then I would recommend John Irving, the author, because he is so good at that. Okay, next book. This is more of a business and marketing book, but it is called Alchemy. Alchemy, the dark art and curious science of creating magic in brands, business, and life. Once again, I first heard about this guy, whose name is Rory Sutherland, from a podcast. And of course, he was promoting his book. I am probably the reason that a lot of your favorite podcasters always have the same rotating series of authors on their shows, because NPCs like me just buy the books the second they hear about them. But this book was really fucking good. So it's basically about this guy's experience as an advertising executive for a creative ad agency in London. And it's basically all about this concept of thinking outside the box and how people... Sorry, somebody's rolling their garbage cans by my window right now, which you can probably hear. Which is crazy because that guys came. So he's getting hit with a fine, which is so stupid. I don't know why neighborhoods in at least the United States do that. Or like certain homeowners associations. Oh my god. I don't think he could be any louder if he tried. Okay, just focus on my voice. There have been a couple times where we left the garbage can out for a day after the garbage guys came, and somebody from the association literally came by and took a picture and mailed the picture to us and said we were getting fined if it happened again. I know there are rules, but that's just crazy that you've got a guy out there taking pictures of garbage cans. Anyways, I almost went off there. This book is about actually being creative in business and not just coming up with conventional and boring solutions to business problems, and thinking about why people want what they want and not just trying to design cool products for the sake of them being cool. Perfect example of this, and I actually experienced this with my work that I do with my best friend and I's business recently, but here's a cool example. There used to be a time when if you were checking out on a website, like an e-commerce store, like Best Buy or Amazon or Target or any of your favorite fashion brands, that you had to make an account to check out and make a purchase. There was no other choice. Until this one website designer came up with this idea to just add a button that said checkout as guest. So you weren't required to sign up for an account and verify your email address in order to make a purchase on the site. And that random, seemingly out of nowhere idea generated the business that he implemented this change for an extra $300 million within its first year of showing up on the site. So it's things like that where a lot of, CEOs and marketing managers and higher ups would just say, maybe just make the account creation process easier, or offer them an extra 5% off when they sign up for an account. Just coming up with cool, out-of-the-box ideas that actually address things that your customers want is the idea behind the book. So he lives in London, and he works with a lot of the government or parliament contracted agencies, and they do things like design trains to be more comfortable and figure out ways that would make people who have to take the metro or public transit to work more positive experiences, things like that, which I know sounds boring, but the solutions he comes up with are so crazy and genius that's why I love the book. It just encouraged me to think about things differently in my own business, I guess. Okay, I'm seriously running out of steam. Let's wrap this up. I'm not going to show this one. This is a book that I actually listened to a couple months ago, and then I ended up buying the hard copy because I liked it. And it's called The Courage to Be Disliked. I don't think you're going to be able to see it. I took the plastic cover off. The Courage to Be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga, two Japanese authors. The reason I like this book is for one reason and one reason only, and that reason is a lesson that they talked about. So basically it's set up as a conversation between a philosopher and a student, is this idea that, and I'm not saying this is true, it's just a different way to think about things. There is no such thing as trauma, is what this author says, according to this type of psychology he's following called Adlerian psychology. There's no such thing as trauma, and that all of the feelings that you have are designed to fulfill a certain purpose. So maybe you are feeling angry because you don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody. So your body, your mind encourages you to have that emotion, knowing that it's going to keep you from having the conversation because you are afraid of change or something like that. Oh no, my camera's gonna die. Fuck. I've got one more book I gotta get to. Really, where this resonated with me is this idea that I have been always a person to have a very low opinion of myself and kind of shit on myself and be really self-critical. And this might not make sense, but it did to me. But I think part of why I did that is because I was scared of who I could actually be if I got past these feelings, because I am uncomfortable with the idea of change sometimes, and it's easier for me to sit in a place where I feel unconfident and insecure and unhappy with myself, because if I were to let go of those feelings, I think I could become somebody else, but doing that would make me feel really nervous and on edge because I wouldn't know what that experience was like. So it's just this idea that we kind of manufacture our own realities with our feelings, and that they aren't just entirely based on our past experiences. So definitely interesting if you want to check it out. But that leads me to my last book, which I also took the cover off of, but it's called Creativity Inc. Creativity Inc. And it was written by Ed Catmull, who is one of the co-founders of Pixar. So this book is all about the journey of Pixar becoming a small software engineering company to the infamous, world-renowned, Disney-owned storytelling company who has made so many of the stories we know and loved growing up, like Toy Story or A Bug's Life, etc. You know all of them. And part of it is about the company itself and how it was created and grown, but really it's a story about the importance of storytelling and creativity and how to create an environment or a company that encourages, promotes, and most importantly, protects creativity, which, again, as a creative person, is something I'm fascinated by. So, I love when people can share their life experiences in the form of stories and not just preaching generalities, and there goes my camera. So we're doing this last part in the dark once again. And this book is a perfect example of that because his entire life story as a founder and executive at Pixar is what taught him these lessons, and he takes us through all of them. It is such a good book. I've read it 1.5 times. I still gotta finish it again, but it is so good. This is probably on my top 5. So